When I first met Lauren, it felt like meeting the missing piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was assembling. She was everything I wasn't: carefree, effortlessly charming, and full of passion for the arts. While I lived by my planner, she painted outside the lines, literally, as she worked part-time as an artist and loved experimenting with bold, abstract canvases. I was a software engineer, precise and meticulous by nature. We balanced each other perfectly, or so I thought. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind but a steady climb. We dated for 3 years before getting married and recently celebrated our 10th anniversary. Lauren, with her infectious laugh and unshakable optimism, became my anchor. She had this ability to make the mundane magical. Whether it was an ordinary dinner at home or a weekend getaway, she infused life with color. I, on the other hand, was the planner, the problem solver. I made sure our mortgage was always paid on time. Our investments were stable, and we could afford the studio Lauren dreamed of owning one day. While she painted her visions on canvas, I built a world where she could pursue them without worry. Despite our complementary personalities, cracks had started forming over the years. Lauren's restlessness grew, her bursts of enthusiasm often fading into bouts of detachment. My work was demanding, and I didn't always have the energy to notice, let alone address, her quiet withdrawal. I chalked it up to life's natural ebb and flow. Couples evolve, I told myself. We had our rituals, though. Every Saturday morning, we'd sit on the porch, sipping coffee and planning the day. Lauren had recently started going for massages at a new wellness center in town. She raved about how relaxed she felt afterward, about how it cleared her mind and helped her creativity flow. I encouraged it. It seemed like a healthy outlet for her. I didn't know then that her massages would become the catalyst for the unraveling of everything we had built. The first time Lauren mentioned the wellness center, it was in passing. We were sitting on the porch, mugs of coffee in hand, the early morning sunlight spilling over our neatly trimmed lawn. She had seen an ad online for Lavender Spring Spa and wanted to try their full-body relaxation package. I joked about her being pampered while I slogged away at debugging code, and she laughed, promising to bring back some of the Zen energy. She came home from that first session glowing, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. "You should try it sometime," she said, flopping onto the couch next to me. "It's like they melt all the tension right out of you. This guy, Daniel, he's incredible. It's not just a massage, it's like therapy for your body." I remember raising an eyebrow at the enthusiasm in her voice, but thought nothing of it. Lauren was the type to get excited about anything new. She'd immerse herself in pottery classes or yoga retreats, only to abandon them a few weeks later when something else caught her interest. The massages seemed no different. Over the next few months, though, her trips to Lavender Springs became a ritual. Every Thursday evening, she'd head out for her session, returning home relaxed and unusually giddy. She began experimenting more with her art, staying up late to splash paint on her canvases. Her newfound energy was contagious, and I was genuinely happy for her. It felt like the spark in her had reignited. What I didn't realize was how those Thursday evenings were transforming from a self-care routine into something far more sinister. One night, after her session, I noticed she was quieter than usual. As we lay in bed, I asked if something was bothering her. She hesitated before brushing it off, claiming she was just tired. But as the weeks went on, I noticed other changes. She started locking her phone, something she'd never done before. Her Thursday evenings stretched later and later, and she always had a plausible excuse: a traffic jam, a detour to pick up groceries, or simply losing track of time. It was subtle, but the Lauren I knew, the open, carefree woman I fell in love with, seemed to be slipping away. She was still warm, still kind, but there was a distance in her eyes that I couldn't quite bridge. I chalked it up to her artistic temperament, to the ebbs and flows of her creative spirit. I didn't know then how wrong I was. Lauren's Thursday evenings soon became sacred. She defended them fiercely, even when I suggested a date night or a rare dinner with friends. "This is my time," she'd say, smiling softly. "It's the only thing that really helps me reset." Her insistence seemed reasonable enough, and I didn't push back. Everyone needs their space, right? But then came the oddities. Once, she came home wearing a new bracelet, a thin silver chain with a delicate charm dangling from it. I asked where she got it, and she replied casually, "Oh, one of the spa attendants was selling these. I thought it was pretty." Her explanation made sense, but something about the way she avoided my gaze as she said it left a seed of unease in my chest. That seed began to grow a week later, when she came home smelling different. Not the usual lavender and eucalyptus oils she'd gushed about, but something richer, almost musky. "New massage oil?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she said quickly. "They're always trying new blends." She changed the subject immediately, launching into a story about her latest painting. I didn't press further, but the unease lingered. The next week, curiosity got the better of me. Lauren had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, and for the first time in our marriage, I picked it up, my heart pounding. It was locked, as usual, but her notifications revealed nothing suspicious. Just a few missed messages from her art supply store and her best friend, Maggie. Still, something didn't feel right. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Lauren deserved her privacy, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. Then came the Thursday when she didn't come home until well past midnight. When I asked why she was so late, she sighed, exasperated. "The spa was running behind. Do we really have to do this every time I'm a little late?" Her tone stung. Lauren rarely snapped at me, and when she did, it was usually followed by an immediate apology. This time, though, she simply grabbed a glass of water and went straight to bed, leaving me to stew in a whirlpool of doubts. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing the smallest of shifts. She seemed happier when she left for the spa than when she returned. Her phone was always on silent, always tucked away. When I tried to suggest joining her for a couple's massage, she dismissed the idea with a tight smile. "Trust me, it's not your thing," she said, almost too casually. That's when I started to feel it, a faint but persistent alarm ringing in the back of my mind. Was I imagining things? Or was there something hidden beneath the surface of our ordinary, comfortable life? The Thursday rituals continued, each one adding another thread to the growing knot in my chest. Lauren's explanations, once light and conversational, had become clipped and defensive. One evening, she told me the spa had introduced a loyalty program and joked, "At this rate, I'll have a lifetime membership." The words felt hollow, like she was trying too hard to convince me, and maybe herself, that everything was normal. That night, I decided to do something I had never done before: follow her. She left the house at her usual time, dressed in casual leggings and a loose sweatshirt, her bag slung over her shoulder. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my car keys. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel as I tailed her from a safe distance. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad detective movie. This was Lauren, my wife, the woman who knew every one of my quirks and still chose to love me. What was I doing? Lauren's car turned into the lot for Lavender Springs Spa, and I pulled into a spot across the street, partially obscured by a row of bushes. She entered the building, her silhouette briefly outlined against the frosted glass door. For the next hour, I sat in my car, oscillating between shame and determination. Around 9:30, the door opened. Lauren emerged, her hair slightly tousled, and a man followed close behind her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that was hard to miss. They exchanged a laugh, and then she hugged him. It wasn't a quick, friendly embrace. It lingered, her head resting on his chest for a moment longer than felt appropriate. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. My heart hammered as I watched them part ways, Lauren walking back to her car, the man disappearing around the corner of the building. When she got home, she acted like nothing was amiss. I sat on the couch, pretending to watch a game, while she breezed through the door and kissed me on the cheek. "Good session tonight," she said, heading to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. I muttered something in response, my mind racing. Was it innocent? Could this man be just another staff member? Maybe I was overreacting. But then why had she never mentioned him? And why did their hug feel like more than a casual gesture? I wanted to confront her, but I wasn't ready, not without more information. So I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't. I started looking into her life. The next day, while she was out running errands, I searched her laptop. Her browser history was clean, too clean, almost like she'd been deliberately erasing it. In her emails, I found receipts from Lavender Springs Spa confirming her sessions, but no correspondence that seemed unusual. Then I stumbled upon her art portfolio, a digital folder she kept meticulously organized. Among her recent works was a series of abstract paintings. They were bold and chaotic, swirling with deep reds and stark blacks, colors she rarely used. One painting caught my attention, a vague silhouette of a man, his features blurred but undeniably strong. The figure radiated an intensity that made my stomach twist. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if I was seeing things that weren't there, or if Lauren's art had started reflecting something she couldn't admit to me, or maybe even to herself. The painting haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the abstract silhouette was more than just a figment of Lauren's imagination. There was a rawness to it, a passion that didn't belong to the steady, predictable life we had built together. I tried to dismiss it as an artist's whim, but deep down, I knew better. Over the next week, I observed her more closely, noticing patterns I'd previously ignored. She spent more time in her studio, her door often closed. She'd disappear into her world of paints and brushes for hours, emerging only to grab a snack or a cup of tea. When I asked to see her new work, she hesitated. "It's not ready," she said, her voice unusually guarded. Lauren had always been open about her art, often asking for my opinion. Now, she seemed intent on keeping me out. The next Thursday, her spa night, I decided to push a little. "You're spending a lot of time there," I said over breakfast. "What's so special about this place?" Lauren smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just peaceful. It helps me unwind. You wouldn't understand. You hate massages." Her tone was light, but the words stung. I brushed it off, nodding as if her explanation satisfied me. It didn't. That evening, as she left for the spa, I decided to take my investigation a step further. Instead of following her this time, I went to Lavender Springs during the day. Posing as a potential client, I entered the serene lobby, inhaling the scent of lavender and eucalyptus. A cheerful receptionist greeted me, her name tag reading Carla. I asked about their services, pretending to be curious about booking a session for Lauren's upcoming birthday. Carla handed me a brochure and launched into a rehearsed pitch about their various packages. I let her talk, my eyes scanning the room for anything that might stand out. Then I saw it. A small wall-mounted display featuring photos of the staff. Each one was captioned with a name and a brief description. Among them was the man I had seen hugging Lauren. His name was Ethan, and according to the placard, he was a licensed massage therapist specializing in deep tissue techniques and holistic healing. My chest tightened as I stared at his smiling photo. Ethan was exactly the type of man who would have caught Lauren's eye in another life. Confident, charming, and just mysterious enough to seem unattainable. "Is Ethan available for sessions?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. Carla's eyes lit up. "Oh, he's one of our most popular therapists. He's fully booked for weeks, though. But I can put you on a wait list if you'd like." "No, that's fine," I said quickly, my pulse racing. I thanked her and left the spa, the brochure crumpled in my hand. That night, when Lauren returned home, I studied her more intently than ever. She seemed lighter, almost giddy, as she recounted a story about a crazy playlist they'd played at the spa. She didn't mention Ethan, but the image of him loomed large in my mind. I didn't sleep much that night, my thoughts tangled in a web of questions I wasn't ready to answer. Was I overreacting? Could their relationship be purely professional? Or was I staring down the barrel of a truth I wasn't prepared to face? The next few days felt like I was living in someone else's life. Lauren carried on as though everything was fine, humming while she cooked dinner, asking about my day like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The image of Ethan's face on that staff wall had seared itself into my memory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren's world, our world, was spinning further and further out of reach. By Tuesday, I couldn't hold back anymore. I decided to search her studio while she was out running errands. I told myself it was innocent curiosity, that I only wanted to understand her better, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was looking for answers. The studio smelled like turpentine and lavender, her signature scent. Canvases were stacked along the walls, some finished, others mid-process. I sifted through them cautiously, careful not to disturb her arrangement. Most were abstract works, her usual style, but there were several pieces that stood out. One was a portrait, rough, incomplete, but unmistakably Ethan. His strong jawline and intense eyes were rendered in bold, confident strokes. My stomach twisted. She hadn't painted me in years. Behind the portrait, I found another piece that stopped me cold. It was a small, almost unfinished canvas, but the subject was clear. Two figures intertwined, their forms vague but unmistakably intimate. It wasn't graphic, but it was suggestive enough to leave no room for misinterpretation. My hands shook as I replaced the canvases, careful to leave everything as I'd found it. I left the studio feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My worst fears were no longer just fears. They were solidifying into something undeniable. On Thursday, Lauren left for her usual massage session. I didn't bother hiding my unease as she kissed me goodbye. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head in concern. "Yeah," I lied, my voice tight. "Just a long day at work." She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and left, her car disappearing down the street. This time, I didn't follow her. Instead, I logged into the joint bank account we'd shared for years. I'd never had a reason to track her spending before, but now, every transaction felt like a potential clue. Most of her purchases were mundane: groceries, art supplies, coffee shops. But then I noticed a recurring charge that didn't match any of her usual expenses. It was for a boutique hotel downtown. The charge appeared twice in the last 3 months, both on Thursday nights. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle finally snapping into place. Lauren wasn't spending extra time at the spa. She wasn't stuck in traffic or running errands. She was meeting Ethan. That night, when she came home, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Evidence. Clarity. Anything that would stop her from weaving a lie when I finally forced the truth out of her. I'd never felt so trapped, torn between the life I thought we had and the betrayal I was starting to see more clearly with each passing day. By the time the next Thursday rolled around, my resolve had hardened. I needed answers, and I couldn't rely on Lauren to give them to me willingly. She left the house in her usual way, the faint scent of her favorite perfume trailing behind her as the door clicked shut. This time, I didn't wait. I logged into a GPS tracking app I'd installed on her car earlier in the week. It felt invasive, even wrong, but I was past the point of second-guessing myself. If she was meeting Ethan, I had to know. Her car's signal pinged at Lavender Springs Spa, as I expected. For an hour, the location didn't change, and I began to wonder if I'd misjudged her after all. But then, just as my doubts began to creep in, the signal moved. It headed downtown, stopping at the address of the boutique hotel I'd seen on our bank statement. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I followed the route. The hotel came into view, a sleek, modern building with tinted windows that seemed to mock my helplessness. I parked across the street, my pulse hammering as I stared at the entrance. Moments later, Lauren emerged from the passenger seat of a black car. Ethan was driving. They laughed as they stepped inside, Lauren's arm brushing against his in a way that made my stomach churn. I stayed frozen in my car for what felt like hours, the image of them together replaying in my mind like a broken record. Part of me wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to make her explain. But what could she say that would undo what I'd just seen? Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo of them entering the hotel. My hand trembled as I hit the shutter button, the weight of the evidence both empowering and devastating. When Lauren came home later that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in, her face lighting up with a practiced smile. "Hey, babe," she said, setting her bag down by the door. "You're up late." I forced a casual tone. "Couldn't sleep." "How was the spa?" Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, so brief I might have missed it if I weren't looking for it. "Relaxing," she said. "The usual." I nodded, pretending to be engrossed in the book I was holding. "Glad to hear it." She hesitated in the doorway, as if sensing the tension in the air. But when I didn't press her, She slipped away to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Over the next few days, I started piecing together more evidence. I checked the credit card statements again and found additional charges for dinners and drinks at upscale restaurants near the hotel. I scrolled through her social media, noticing subtle changes in her posts. Fewer pictures of us, more abstract quotes about finding freedom and inspiration. The worst discovery came when I hacked into her email. I'd never done anything like that before, and I hated myself for crossing the line. But there it was, a message from Ethan. "Looking forward to Thursday," he'd written. "You make everything worth it." Her reply was short but damning. "Me too." My chest ached as I stared at the screen, the words blurring through a haze of anger and betrayal. There was no denying it anymore. Lauren wasn't just keeping a secret. She was building a life that didn't include me. The days following my discovery were some of the longest of my life. Every moment around Lauren felt like a performance, an unbearable charade where I played the role of an oblivious husband. She laughed, she cooked, she painted, everything as if nothing had changed. But I saw the cracks now, the carefully hidden gaps in her facade. The way her smile lingered too long after I asked her about her day. The way she avoided my eyes when I asked if we should plan a weekend getaway. I could feel her slipping away from me, even as she pretended nothing was wrong. I wasn't sleeping much. Every night I stayed up late, combing through her digital life for anything else that could confirm what I already knew. The emails had been damning, but I wanted more. Not for me. I had seen enough. I wanted something she couldn't talk her way out of, something concrete for when the confrontation came. One evening, while Lauren was in her studio, I decided to check her phone. She usually kept it locked, but I'd noticed she sometimes left it unlocked while charging in the kitchen. Sure enough, when I picked it up, the screen was active. I opened her messages, scrolling past mundane chats with friends and family until I found a conversation labeled simply with an emoji, a wine glass. My heart sank as I opened it. The messages were a mix of flirting and plans, casual exchanges that painted a vivid picture of their growing intimacy. Ethan sent her compliments about her art, called her his muse. She sent him pictures of her paintings, sometimes selfies from the studio, her hair messy, paint smudged on her cheek. And then there was the last message. "Tomorrow night. Same place. Can't wait to see you." I felt a surge of anger, a heat that rose from my chest to my temples. Tomorrow night. Another Thursday. Another lie. The next day, I couldn't focus on work. Every time I tried to drown myself in code, my mind wandered back to that text thread. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of facing it made my stomach churn. That evening, I told Lauren I had to work late. "Big deadline," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. She didn't ask many questions, just gave me a distracted nod before heading out for her spa session. I waited for her car to leave, then grabbed my keys and followed. This time, I didn't stop across the street. I parked a block away from the hotel and walked, my hands trembling as I approached the sleek glass doors. Inside, the lobby was quiet, a lone receptionist typing at a desk. I approached her, keeping my voice steady. "Hi," I said. "I'm meeting my wife here, but she forgot to text me her room number. Could you help me?" The receptionist gave me a polite smile. "Of course. What's her name?" "Lauren," I said, pausing. "Lauren Adams." She typed for a moment, then glanced up. "Room 508. "Thank you," I said, my voice tight. My heart pounded as I stepped into the elevator, each floor feeling like a mile. When I reached the 5th floor, I stood in front of room 508, my breath shallow. For a moment, I considered turning back. But then I heard it, a muffled laugh, Lauren's laugh, coming from the other side of the door. The anger I'd been suppressing surged to the surface, and before I could stop myself, I knocked. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by hushed voices. My pulse raced as the door creaked open, revealing Lauren, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. "David," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" Behind her, Ethan appeared, his expression a mixture of confusion and defiance. His shirt was unbuttoned, the telltale signs of their betrayal clear as day. My voice was calm, but my hands shook. "I think we need to talk, Lauren. All three of us." Lauren's face was a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, guilt, fear. Ethan's, on the other hand, hardened into a mask of defensive calm. He stepped forward slightly, as if shielding Lauren, which only fanned the flames of my anger. "What are you doing here, David?" Lauren's voice was shaky, her words tumbling over each other. I stepped inside, forcing the door open wider. "That's the wrong question," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "The right question is, what are you doing here?" Ethan crossed his arms, his posture stiff. "Look, man, maybe we should all just—" "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. My gaze burned into Lauren's. "You owe me an explanation. Start talking." Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting between me and Ethan. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she whispered, "It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I let out a bitter laugh, pulling out my phone. I opened the photo I'd taken of them entering the hotel, holding it up for her to see. "Explain this, then. Or the messages. Or the credit card charges." Her shoulders slumped, the weight of her lies crushing whatever defense she'd been trying to muster. "David," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't mean for this to happen." I barked out another laugh, the sound foreign even to me. "Didn't mean for what to happen, Lauren? Didn't mean to cheat on me? Didn't mean to lie every Thursday night while I sat at home like an idiot, thinking you were getting a massage?" Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is between you and her, man. Maybe we should—" "Shut up," I said, turning to him. "You don't get to talk. Not after what you've done." Lauren placed a trembling hand on my arm, but I shrugged it off. "David, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Let me explain." "Explain?" My voice rose, the dam holding back my fury finally breaking. "What's there to explain, Lauren? That you've been sneaking around with him? That you've destroyed our marriage? That you've made me feel like a fool?" Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no pity. "Not now. Not after everything." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice choked. "It started with the massages, but then we just connected. It was never supposed to be like this." "Connected?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "What about our connection? What about everything we've built together? Did that mean nothing to you?" She sobbed, her shoulders shaking, but she didn't answer, and her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. I turned to Ethan, my voice cold and sharp. "Do you even realize what you've done? Or do you just not care?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. His silence only enraged me further. "I hope it was worth it," I said, my voice low but cutting, "because you've both destroyed something that can never be fixed." I stepped back, my chest heaving. Lauren reached out to me again, but I moved away. "Don't," I said, my voice breaking. "Don't touch me." For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with the weight of everything unsaid, of everything shattered. Finally, I turned to the door. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," I said, my voice hollow. "Enjoy your connection." Without another word, I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. The world outside felt colder, sharper, as if it had changed in the time I'd been inside. But maybe it wasn't the world that had changed. Maybe it was just me. The drive home was a blur. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as my mind churned with fragments of the confrontation. Lauren's tear-streaked face, Ethan's tense posture, my own voice raised in fury. The memories cut like glass, sharp and unforgiving. When I arrived home, the silence hit me harder than I expected. For years, this house had been filled with the sound of Lauren's laughter, her music playing softly in the background, the faint clink of her paintbrushes against glass jars. Now, those echoes felt like ghosts haunting an empty shell. I dropped onto the couch, my head in my hands, and let the weight of it all crash down. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation. It was a tempest inside me, pulling me in every direction at once. I wanted to scream, to cry, to destroy something, but I just sat there, paralyzed. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The practicality of it helped ground me. As I outlined what had happened, I kept my voice steady, factual. The lawyer, a composed woman with years of experience, assured me I had a strong case. The evidence I'd gathered, the texts, the photos, the receipts, would work in my favor. "Do you want to pursue spousal support?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "No," I said after a moment. "I just want this over with." She nodded, taking notes. "We'll draft the papers immediately." Over the next few days, I avoided Lauren's calls and texts. Each message was a variation of the same thing. Apologies, pleas for a conversation, promises to explain. I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? That I'd forgive her? That we could work through this? The very thought felt like a betrayal of myself. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on anything except the mess my life had become. Most nights, I sat on the porch with a drink, staring into the darkness, replaying every moment of our marriage in my mind. Had I missed the signs? Could I have done something differently? One afternoon, a week after the confrontation, Lauren showed up at the house. I heard her car in the driveway and debated whether to ignore her. But then she knocked, her voice trembling as she called out, "David, please, just let me talk to you." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She looked terrible, her eyes red and puffy, her hair disheveled. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly swallowed by the memory of her betrayal. "I don't want to hear it, Lauren," I said, keeping my voice cold. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we've been through so much together. Can't we at least talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Fine," I said. "Talk." She stepped inside, hesitating as if unsure where to begin. Finally, she said, "I don't have an excuse. What I did was selfish and wrong. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop." I shook my head, bitterness lacing my words. "Didn't know how to stop? You had plenty of chances to stop, Lauren. But you didn't. You kept lying, sneaking around, choosing him over me." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't stop. "Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built. Everything I thought we were." "I know," she sobbed. "I hate myself for it. But I still love you, David. I never stopped loving you." Her words felt like poison. I straightened, my voice cold. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You don't destroy the people you love." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I said. "This is over, Lauren. You made your choice." Her face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, sobbing. I watched her for a moment, my own heart breaking despite everything. Then I turned away, heading for the stairs. "David, please," she called after me. "Don't do this." But I didn't look back. Lauren didn't leave after I walked away. I could hear her downstairs, her sobs growing quieter as the minutes dragged on. Eventually, I heard the sound of the front door closing. When I peeked out the window, her car was still in the driveway. She hadn't gone far. I stayed upstairs, pacing, fighting the urge to open a bottle and drown out the noise in my head. But no amount of whiskey could numb the fury or the hurt. The betrayal cut too deep. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. The paper was tear-stained, the writing shaky. "David, I know I've ruined everything, and I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm begging you to let me prove that I can be better. I don't want to lose you. Please don't shut me out completely. Lauren." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Her words meant nothing to me now. Actions had spoken louder than any apology ever could. That night, as I sat on the porch, trying to clear my head, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a picture, grainy and poorly lit, but unmistakable. Lauren and Ethan, sitting together at what looked like a bar. Her hand rested on his thigh, his arm draped over her shoulders. The caption read, "You deserve to know everything." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Who had sent it? Was this someone trying to help me, or someone trying to hurt me further? Another message buzzed in. "Ask her about the weekend in the cabin." The cabin. My heart pounded. Lauren had told me she'd gone on a solo art retreat a month ago, claiming she needed time to reconnect with her muse. I hadn't questioned it at the time, but now the pieces clicked into place. She hadn't gone alone. I closed the message thread, my hands trembling. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Lauren showed up again. This time, I didn't let her inside. We stood on the porch, the early light casting long shadows across the lawn. "Why are you still here?" I asked, my voice cold. "I wanted to talk," she said, wringing her hands. "I wanted to explain." "Explain the cabin?" I interrupted, watching her face closely. Her eyes widened, and for a brief second, I saw panic flash across her features. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Lauren," I said, stepping closer. "Someone sent me a picture. You and Ethan. And they told me to ask about the cabin. So I'm asking. Tell me the truth." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It was just one weekend," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "It didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean anything? You destroyed us for something that didn't mean anything?" Tears filled her eyes again. "I was confused," she said. "I wasn't thinking straight." You weren't confused," I snapped. "You made choices. Over and over again. You chose him. And now, you're going to have to live with the consequences." I stepped back, my voice firm. "You need to leave, Lauren. For good. I'll have the lawyer send the papers. I don't want to see you again." She stared at me, her face crumpling as the reality sank in. "David, please," she whispered. "We can fix this." "There's nothing left to fix," I said, my voice hollow. "Go." Lauren finally left, her car pulling out of the driveway as I watched from the window. The relief I expected didn't come. Instead, a strange hollowness settled in its place. The house felt cavernous without her, every room echoing with memories that now felt tainted. I tried to busy myself by cleaning, tossing out little remnants of her. A scarf on the coat rack, a mug she'd left in the sink. But no matter how much I scrubbed or sorted, I couldn't shake the feeling that her betrayal lingered in the walls. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "You should check her email from 2 weeks ago. Look for Ethan." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. Whoever was sending these messages knew far too much about Lauren's affair. But why were they helping me? And how did they have access to her email? After a long moment of hesitation, I logged into her account. Her password hadn't changed. It was the same one we'd used for years, a combination of our wedding date and her favorite flower. The irony wasn't lost on me. I scrolled through her inbox, scanning subject lines until I found it. "Can't wait for next time," from Ethan. My heart sank as I opened it. The message was short but damning. "Last weekend was incredible. I'll never forget the way you looked at me by the fire. Let's make it a tradition. Same time next month?" Lauren's reply was even shorter. "Yes. Always." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it crushing me. The cabin wasn't just a fling. It was something they'd planned to repeat, an escape they'd built together, a future without me. Fueled by equal parts rage and determination, I typed out a response to the unknown number. "Who are you, and why are you sending me this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Someone who knows the truth. You deserve to know too." I tried again. "How do you know all of this?" There was a pause before the next message arrived. "Ethan has done this before. You're not the first husband he's ruined. I thought you should know who you're dealing with." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Ethan wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator, preying on vulnerable women and destroying lives in the process. And Lauren had fallen for him. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities, questions, and the faint glimmer of an idea. Ethan had taken something from me, but he hadn't won. Not yet. If he thought he could waltz into my life, steal my wife, and walk away unscathed, he was sorely mistaken. I started to form a plan, a way to take back control of the narrative. Revenge wasn't something I'd ever considered before, but now, it felt like the only way to reclaim the pieces of myself that Ethan and Lauren had shattered. The rules had changed, and so had I. The first thing I did the next morning was reach out to my lawyer. I explained the latest discovery, the emails, the cabin, the pattern Ethan seemed to follow. My lawyer listened intently, then offered a solution. document everything. You need to have a clear, indisputable timeline, she said. It's not just about the divorce anymore. If this man is a predator, you need to expose him. It was a good point, but my intentions had shifted. This wasn't just about the legal fallout. I wanted Ethan to feel the same sense of powerlessness and humiliation that he'd inflicted on me. And I had just the idea to make that happen. For the next week, I kept my head down, playing the role of a wronged husband simply trying to move on. Lauren reached out a few more times, leaving voicemails begging for a conversation, but I ignored them all. I didn't need her lies clouding my focus. Instead, I spent my time gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Emails, text threads, financial records, anything that painted a picture of Ethan's manipulation and Lauren's complicity. I printed everything, creating a file thick enough to bury them both. But I wasn't finished. The anonymous texter had been silent for days, but I decided to reach out again. You said Ethan has done this before. Can you prove it? A reply came within the hour. Yes. Meet me at the cafe on Main Street tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll bring what you need. I arrived at the cafe early, scanning the room for anyone who looked out of place. A woman in her mid-30s sat near the window, her laptop open and a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly before she gave me a subtle nod. David? She asked as I approached. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. You're the one who's been texting me? She hesitated, then said, Yes. My name's Alyssa. Ethan used to be my husband. The words hit like a freight train. Your husband? I asked, stunned. She nodded, her expression a mix of bitterness and determination. We were married for 5 years. He cheated on me with one of his clients, a woman from the spa where he worked. Just like Lauren. She slid a folder across the table. Everything you need is in here. Emails, photos, even court documents from our divorce. Ethan's a serial adulterer. He preys on women who feel neglected, uses his charm to worm his way into their lives. And when he's done with them, he moves on to the next. I opened the folder, my heart sinking as I skimmed the contents. Alyssa's story was almost identical to mine. A calculated seduction, lies, manipulation, and eventual betrayal. Ethan was nothing more than a parasite. What do you want me to do with this? I asked, my voice tight. Her eyes hardened. Make him pay. He's ruined too many lives already. It's time someone stopped him. Armed with Alyssa's evidence and my own, I began crafting the next phase of my plan. The first step was simple but devastating. Expose the truth. I compiled everything into a digital folder, carefully organizing each piece of evidence into an irrefutable narrative. Then, I sent it anonymously to Lavender Springs Spa, copying their board of directors and a few local journalists for good measure. The second step was more personal. Using the information Alyssa had provided, I uncovered a detail that would hit Ethan where it hurt most, his reputation. I learned he had been vying for a high-profile position with a prominent wellness organization, a role that would have cemented his career. A few well-timed emails to their leadership, complete with attached evidence, ensured that his application would never see the light of day. By the end of the week, the fallout began. Ethan's smiling photo disappeared from Lavender Springs' website, replaced by a statement announcing his termination. Local news outlets picked up the story, running headlines about the disgraced therapist whose trail of broken marriages had finally caught up with him. Lauren called me that evening, her voice frantic. David, what have you done? Ethan's been fired. His career is ruined. I couldn't help but smile. Good, I said, my tone icy. Now he knows what it feels like. The fallout was swift and brutal. Lavender Springs Spa's public statement about Ethan's termination caused a ripple effect, tarnishing his professional reputation beyond repair. His name became synonymous with scandal, and every mention of him in local circles was accompanied by whispers of infidelity and deceit. I should have felt satisfied, triumphant even. But as I watched the drama unfold from the sidelines, I realized something unsettling. Revenge wasn't filling the void Lauren and Ethan had left behind. The anger was still there, burning low and steady, but it hadn't been extinguished. If anything, it had turned inward, leaving me questioning everything about the life I'd built and the man I'd become. Lauren, on the other hand, seemed desperate to salvage whatever she could. She left voicemails and texts daily, each one more pleading than the last. "David, please, I didn't know it would go this far. I never wanted to hurt you like this. Can we talk? Just one conversation. That's all I'm asking. You don't have to forgive me, but don't let this destroy both of us." Her words barely registered anymore. I deleted most of her messages without reading them. She was part of the past, a chapter one was determined to close. But then, one message caught my attention. "David, I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but I need you to know something. Ethan wasn't who I thought he was. He lied to me, too." I stared at the screen, her words echoing in my mind. Was this another manipulation? Another attempt to shift blame and elicit pity? Or was she finally confronting the truth about the man she'd chosen over me? Against my better judgment, I called her. She answered on the first ring. "David," she breathed, relief flooding her voice. "Thank you for calling." "This isn't forgiveness, Lauren," I said, my tone cold. "I just want to hear what you have to say." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was trembling. "Ethan, he's not who I thought he was. After everything happened, he started pulling away. He blamed me for what you did, for him losing his job, his career. He said I was a liability." I clenched my jaw, anger flaring anew. "And now you're realizing what kind of person he is? Convenient." "I know I don't deserve your sympathy," she said quickly, "but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see everything. He used me, David, just like he's used so many others." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. Lauren's betrayal was still unforgivable, but her pain mirrored my own in a way that was hard to ignore. The next day, I received another message from Alyssa. "Ethan's trying to rebuild his image. He's holding a wellness retreat in 2 weeks. Thought you'd want to know." Attached was a flyer for the event, touting Ethan as a renowned expert in holistic healing. The audacity was staggering. After everything he'd done, he still believed he could charm his way back into the spotlight. That was when the final piece of my plan clicked into place. If Ethan wanted to play the part of the reformed healer, I would make sure everyone saw the truth. The retreat was being held at a local conference center, a modest but respectable venue. Using Alyssa's connections, I obtained a list of attendees, wellness influencers, potential business partners, and even a few local journalists. It was the perfect audience. On the day of the event, I arrived early, armed with a folder of evidence and Alyssa by my side. She'd agreed to help, her own pain fueling her determination to expose Ethan once and for all. As the event began, Ethan took the stage, his voice smooth and confident as he welcomed the crowd. He was in his element, flashing his practiced smile and spouting platitudes about self-discovery and growth. Halfway through his speech, Alyssa and I stood. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I think everyone here deserves to know the real Ethan." The crowd turned, murmurs spreading as I stepped forward, holding up the folder. "This man isn't a healer. He's a predator. He's destroyed families, manipulated vulnerable women, and lied his way into this room." Ethan's face paled, his composure slipping. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice shaking. "Who even are you?" I smiled coldly. "I'm David, one of the many people whose lives you've tried to ruin." Alyssa stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "And I'm Alyssa, your ex-wife. Remember me, Ethan?" Gasps rippled through the room as we handed out copies of the evidence to the attendees. Photos, emails, testimonials. It was all there, an irrefutable indictment of Ethan's true character. By the time we left, Ethan's reputation was in tatters, his carefully constructed image obliterated. The retreat's aftermath spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with posts and comments about Ethan's disgrace. Local news outlets picked up the story, running exposés that painted a damning picture of the man who had once been a rising star in the wellness world. Ethan vanished from public view, his career effectively over. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction. I had taken back control, but as the adrenaline faded, I was left with a gnawing emptiness. Revenge had given me a purpose, but now that it was done, I wasn't sure what came next. Lauren called me again a few days later, her voice subdued. I heard about the retreat, she said. You didn't have to go that far. Yes, I did, I replied. Ethan deserved everything he got. There was a long pause. And what about us? She asked quietly. Is there any chance of fixing this? Her question hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the pain she'd caused. But another part, the part that had loved her for over a decade, felt only sadness. No, I said finally. There's no going back, Lauren. Too much has been broken. She sighed, a sound full of regret. I'm sorry, David, for everything. I know, I said, but sorry isn't enough. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I went back to work, reconnected with old friends, and started therapy. Talking to someone about the betrayal, the anger, and the sense of loss helped in ways I hadn't expected. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about finding a way to carry it without letting it define me. Alyssa and I kept in touch. Her determination to expose Ethan had sparked a friendship between us, one built on shared pain and a mutual desire to move forward. She'd started volunteering at a support group for victims of infidelity, channeling her experience into helping others. Her strength inspired me. One evening, months later, I found myself standing in front of a blank canvas. It was one of Lauren's, something she'd left behind in her rush to move out. I'd avoided the studio for weeks, unwilling to confront the memories tied to her art. But tonight, something was different. I picked up a brush, hesitating for only a moment before dipping it into a swirl of bold colors. The first stroke felt clumsy, uncertain, but as the minutes passed, I lost myself in the movement, the texture, the freedom of creating something new. When I stepped back, the canvas was a mess of shapes and hues, chaotic but vibrant, raw but alive. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. As the days turned into months, I began to see the betrayal not as an ending, but as a turning point. Lauren's choices had broken something in me, but they had also pushed me to rediscover myself. I wasn't just the husband she had betrayed, or the man Ethan had tried to outmaneuver. I was more than that. I was stronger than that. Life didn't feel perfect, far from it, but it felt real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine.